And here we go, tally ho again. All right, this is just some of the things that you have to do before you would start up one of these old engines. Unfortunately, they are not computer controlled and all, where you can just sit in the seat, push a button, and off the thing goes. Everything is hands-on. It's not that complicated though, because they made things so much more robust and simple in those days. Well, this is a drip boiler. I like to start at the top and then go to the front, and that way I'll have more oil in the cylinder whenever I do fire it up. So what I'll do is I'll make sure this reservoir has at least 3/4 of a glass. It does slosh a little bit, but not a lot, while the engine's running. I'll go ahead and I'll turn on this oil and make sure that it is dripping in underneath, and it is dripping. So that's starting to prime the system by getting all that. Now I think I've already talked about the oiler and how it goes right to the cylinder. It's having time to work its way down through that pipe to be able to drip into the cylinder. Then I'll go around the front, and the front here, drop my can. Alright, I'll make sure that I'll oil this spring, and I'll oil down inside the spring there. Don't think you can see it, but in case you can, there is the valve stem for the valve, and I'll make sure that that has oil down there, and soak that real good, because this is a very high use item. I'll make sure that the keepers are right, and this is sitting as it's supposed to be. I'll make sure that this is loose. There's a little hole on the top of the pin right there. That pin runs all the way down through, and then has a cotter pin on the bottom. And I'm sorry, we're in underneath a tree where there's somewhat shade, but things keep changing as the wind blows the branches. Makes it nice to work, but pain in the butt to try and film. Anyhow, you'll force some oil down in through here, and then you'll oil the two places where you can see it might rub. You come back here and you do this pin at the same way. Now you do want a little slop here. Don't worry about trying to adjust this so it stays tight. It doesn't require that. Having that slop there is actually easier on the engine. Alright, so we have that oiled, we've oiled this, made sure that this is nice and free. Now, down inside here is the intake valve. It has a very soft spring. You want to make sure that that valve moves very easily. So you'll take a screwdriver and place in the top and just give it a little pry, and that one moves. So that is good. It's free. It'll allow the air to come into the engine. Alright. We'll follow this back. We'll make sure that we put a drop of oil or two on this threads here, and that's a locking nut because it threads into this, but we want to try and keep those from corroding. Put a little bit of oil right here on this bar because it slides back and forth. We'll put some in here, and we'll come down to, I don't like calling this a carburetor. It's more like a Venturi with a metering valve in it. This is your metering valve for how much fuel comes in and out of the carburetor. And you can probably see there I have a little line, and that's for me, because if I put it on 1, or open it up one full revolution, that at the top or close to it, if I open it up one whole turn, that's where this engine likes to run whenever it's warm. Whenever it's cold, I open it up about another third to half turn, and that's something that you just have to learn with each engine. Yeah, all these engines are just a little bit of tweak here and there. They like themselves. The camera does not show this very well, and I'm hoping that you can see that right here is a shutter. It will open and shut to allow more air in to the engine. Then there is a little tickler, they call it tickler, and this allows gas to flow into this venturi that's up here, and then this needle valve, that adjustment is right up in here where the gas can come in. You want to make sure that you have this set for however hot or cold it is, how much you have to have it open. You know, once this thing's running and it's been warm for a while, heat it up, you can leave it wide open like that. Whenever you're starting it and it's cold, you've got to close it off some. Alright, and you want to go back here. There is a screen here in the bottom of this valve. You can open it up. I've already done that. It's just a little hat screen that allows, or takes the fuel as it comes from the tank, runs it down through a screen before it allows it to go up to the engine. And it's a really coarse screen. It's not a fine screen. I don't know. It might stop an acorn. Who knows? But most of the dirt that would be in gas, it's not like a regular fuel filter with a paper filter element. So it's not going to block a whole lot of the dirt. But then again, more of the dirt passes through that carburetor, and you wouldn't believe the kind of conditions these engines were made to run in. You open up your fuel valve, and that will allow your fuel from your tank over to your engine. I'm going to turn that off because we're not going to fire it at this exact time. So I don't want to lose any fuel on the ground. Now I'll go back and I'll make sure that there's no weepage on the gas can to say it's a leak. And then I've done that. I have enough fuel in this tank, and then open up the bleeder valve to allow air in and keep it from forming a vacuum in the tank and stopping the fuel flow. Now comes the fun part. It's the part where you get dirty. Every little movement, every little item that might move, this lock, this slide here, you want to oil the spring, you want to oil the adjuster, including the threads. Put a little oil on this keeper right here, and it just runs up against this. And now that is your speed adjustment, believe it or not. That is your speed adjustment. It governs how fast this will come in and lock. And okay, you have all kinds of little moving parts. Well, not little, you know, littlest one's big around as your thumb, but on a smaller engine, these will be smaller. We have a pin with a hole in it. You'll need to soak a lot of oil down through there, pump in as much as it'll hold and drain out. And you want to go ahead and throw more on. You have a little ride cam right here, rides in this. It's like a spool, so I'm going to call it a spool. You want to oil up all your gears, and I think I've covered it before, but you want to use a 30 weight non-detergent oil. Detergent oil suspends dirt in it, and then it makes it easier for a filter to remove the oil if it's dirt's in suspension. But you don't want dirt carried around and around through the gears. You want dirt to be washed out by the oil, and so you want non-detergent. Non-detergent doesn't suspend the contaminants, so it flushes it away and keeps a cleaner, less gritty surface for your gears to mesh together. So after you have that oiled, you'll want to oil your, now these counterweights, these are made for very little travel. Just me moving it that little bit is quite a bit of force. But believe me, these things will swing, and whenever they do, the arm pulls this spool or shuttle over, kicks this over, and it engages here. And that is what will operate the front metering system for the spark and for the valve. And that's what makes it makes an explosion, because it allows the mixture up into your cylinder. This is your piston. I can move this a little bit and you can see the piston move in and out of the machine. This is so neat to watch whenever it's running. It's so quick. You don't think that these things would move that fast, but they do. They move. This one's set for 500 RPM, revolutions per minute. And so this thing spins quite quickly, but it's still slow enough where you can see things run. And if you have kids and you want to teach them what happens with an engine for it to run, these are the best things in the world to let them watch. You just got to make sure that the kids don't stick their face on the fan. They don't reach into the gears and all that other stuff. Don't do it. If your kid doesn't have any common sense, if he doesn't listen to you for some reason, he could get himself in a very bad way very quickly. So if your child is not obedient, I'll have to say it that way. If you don't have control of your child, do not let them near any of these machines. And I know that was highly insulting to some people, but only those people that cannot get control of their child. Now, there's a myriad of reasons why. I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm just trying to say these engines can hurt you, and hurt you bad enough where it can kill you, and it's not a very nice death. So you want to watch your children, just like anything that's super dangerous. You want to make sure that they're safe. Okay, next, after that little public service announcement, you want to take off your grease cups, fill them up full of grease, pre-charge, then take these off. Pre-charge meaning screw them down as hard as you can, run your engine over by hand a couple times, and tighten it down again, run it around another time, and then take them off and refill them with grease and tighten them up one more time. And that way you have nice new grease that is oozing out of all the bearings. And each bearing surface is going to have its own oiler, or grease cup. 1, 2, and 3. I have a connecting rod bearing, I have a main bearing here, and I have a main bearing here. Each one of them has their own grease cup. Okay, let me move this around. There, you can see the grease cup on the connecting rod a little bit better. All 3 in a row. Alright, once you have those greased, you'll take and you will find any point that will rub together. Any point that rubs together, you want to soak down very well with oil. And please remember, whenever you start these, it will sling grease and oil. You can probably see there's a little grease spatter here, and that's normal. It's getting rid of what it doesn't need. It will hold the maximum amount and chuck whatever else it can't use. That's okay. Just add a little bit more now and then and keep them wet while it's running, and you got it made. Now that would be about all the prep that you would have to do, except for turning it over by hand while you're running with the grease cup. You can feel if there's any looseness in any of the bearings, or if the flywheels might be loose for some reason. The flat belt pulley, that's where your power is. That's where your power takeoff is. Your PTO is that flat belt pulley. That's what you put around a rawhide belt or a fiber belt, and it goes back to your equipment and it comes back, and you spinning the engine. That'll spin and power your equipment. Last but not least, wheels. If your machine is on a carriage, and they call this a truck, all right? If it is on a truck, chances are you're going to have either a simple brass or bronze bearing in here, or you could have roller needle type or ball bearings. Most of the time they're just solid metal on a shaft. You want to make sure this stays greased. A lot of folks will go ahead and drill through this cast and put in a couple of grease plugs, and they'll put them on at about 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, so they're not across from each other. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but you want to try and put grease in whatever one is on top and on the side. And if grease fitting is on the bottom, you can pretty much ignore that one and just use the other to pump in grease, because this axle setting up against that bearing surface won't allow very much grease to come in, and you'll think it's full and it's not. Where if you have one off at about another 10 and 2 o'clock, you're able to get grease into the bearing surfaces, just because this has a little bit more clearance to get the grease in. I know it sounds kind of strange, but it works. And I got that off someone that's no longer here. I picked that up, that tidbit of information, whenever I was in my 20s. And I'm pushing 70 next year, so that's an old hint, old tip, but it works. It does work. And I really haven't had this thing that long where I've had a chance to go over little things. Well, big things. That's a big thing. Putting those grease fittings. That's like a #1 thing I wanted to do and never got around to it. I'll let you see what I'm talking about a little bit later on. Whenever I get it done, I'll make sure I make a video.